Is it too soon to say that Super Mario Odyssey is nostalgic to me? Sure, it might not be the same type or level of nostalgia as Super Mario Galaxy 2, which was my first 3D Mario, but it's still technically a childhood game. It came out when I was in 8th grade, so obviously I'm in a completely different place in life since over 7 years have passed. Maybe I'm just being a goofy-ass 21-year-old who thinks they're way older than they actually are, but a lot has changed since I first played Odyssey. On November 4th, 2017, about 1 week after Odyssey's release, I had finally saved up enough to buy my Nintendo Switch. Since I was one of those degenerates that bought Breath of the Wild on my Wii U because I couldn't wait until I got my Switch to play it, Super Mario Odyssey was the first game I got with my newly purchased Nintendo Switch. Because of this, it's no wonder this game fills me with so much nostalgia. On top of being one of the greatest video games I've ever played, I associate it with the day that I got what is probably my favorite video game console now. I've been wanting to talk about this game for a while, but I let my friend borrow my copy of the game, so I haven't had it for the past few months. Today's the day he returns it, so I can finally talk about Super Mario Odyssey. Hey bro, thanks for letting me borrow Odyssey. No problem, bro. You finally gonna do that Mario Odyssey episode, bro? Yeah, bro! Hell yeah, bro! Well, that was not on the agenda for today, but you know what is on the agenda? Super Mario Odyssey. This game is a thing of beauty, and we're gonna talk all about it. So grab your snacks and your drinks, get all cozy, and let's have a little chit-chat about Super Mario Odyssey. We got our first glimpse of Super Mario Odyssey on October 20th, 2016 in the reveal trailer for the Nintendo Switch. No title or anything was revealed. They just casually showed a small few-second clip in the middle of the trailer of a woman playing what was definitely a new 3D Mario game and did not elaborate further. I remember watching this back in the day and wondering why not many people were talking about how weird it was they showed the next entry in one of their biggest series like this instead of giving it its own dedicated trailer. It was made even weirder by the fact that this was the only thing shown that we knew was a new game. They also casually showed Splatoon 2, though I remember most people assuming it was just an enhanced port instead of a full-blown new Splatoon game. It's not like getting a new 3D Mario for the Switch was a surprise or anything. Imagine someone being like, oh shit, they're making another Call of Duty game? Though it wasn't a surprise, I think it would have been more impactful to not show it at all and save it for its official reveal later. Speaking of which, Super Mario Odyssey got its full official trailer on January 13th, 2017 at the Nintendo Switch presentation, where they fully unveiled the Switch in all its details. The title and a release window of Holiday 2017 were revealed, but most importantly, they revealed that this game would be the return of Sandbox Mario, like Super Mario 64 and Sunshine. They even showed this neat little graphic grouping the two different kinds of 3D Mario together. It was cool to see them fully acknowledge how long it's been since the last open world Mario game. Odyssey got another trailer to close Nintendo's E3 Direct in June where the capture mechanic was revealed, as well as the release date. The game was released later that year on October 27th, 2017, and received critical acclaim and was even nominated for Game of the Year in December. What did it do to receive such high praise? Oh, let me tell you. First, let's talk about the most important aspect of this game: exploration. As previously mentioned, Super Mario Odyssey is a return to Sandbox Mario. After 64 and Sunshine, 3D Mario went on a 4-game streak of ditching the open world elements and opting for a more linear design. Galaxy, Galaxy 2, 3D Land, and 3D World are all fantastic games, but many fans were really missing the sandbox style of the first two games. Some fans were even wondering if we'd ever see Sandbox Mario again. This sounds crazy, but there was some logic to their worrying. The linear 3D Mario games were super successful sales-wise, and since linear games tend to be easier to develop than open ones, it seemed like a win-win for Nintendo. Personally, I didn't care too much back then. Like I mentioned, Galaxy 2 is my first 3D Mario, so to me, that's what a 3D Mario was supposed to be. I played the rest of the linear 3D Mario games and loved each and every one of them, but I didn't know what I was missing with the other type of Mario. I hadn't really played 64 or Sunshine prior to playing Odyssey. I was always intrigued by the idea of open world Mario, but I wasn't actively begging for it. When it was announced that this Mario game would be a return to Sandbox, I was super excited to see what all the fuss was about, but I wasn't falling to my knees and thanking Nintendo for it with tears streaming down my face. Odyssey was my first official Sandbox Mario, and I have to say, even though I still love the linear 3D Mario games with their focus on tighter platforming, Odyssey won me over to the other side. I think I prefer Sandbox Mario now. I will continue to play the linear games until the day I die, and I would be open to seeing new ones in the future, but Sandbox is closer to my style of video game, and this is what I want to see the majority of future 3D Mario games be. My favorite aspect of video games in general is exploration, and Super Mario Odyssey absolutely delivers here. Each of its many kingdoms are a blast to explore the ins and outs of. They're all so unique and weird. I love the overall style and atmosphere here. You have all the standard Mario tropes in terms of environments, the desert one, the snowy one, the beach one, but you also have fresh ones like a place made completely out of food, and of course the city full of realistic looking humans. So many of the kingdoms are vastly different from each other in terms of art style and overall feel. On one hand, you have the Luncheon Kingdom, which has a blocky aesthetic and really bright colors, and on the flip side, you have the Wooded Kingdom with its lush greens and finer, more detailed textures. I absolutely love the variety here. It's unlike anything we had ever seen in a Mario game before. Not every kingdom is a winner though. I was pretty disappointed by the Snow Kingdom because I love snowy environments in games because of the atmosphere, but this one was pretty bland to me. On the flip side, I typically hate desert environments in games for being really boring, but the Sand Kingdom is actually one of my favorite kingdoms in the game. I love the aesthetic here. The sand looks fantastic. Something I really appreciate in the kingdoms are the inhabitants. I've always loved the designs of the different races in Mario games. They're always so weird and charming, and I feel like it's an underrated aspect of these games. Some of my favorite races are the Piantas, the Whittles, and the Penguins. Oh, and I really love these gear guys. These guys are fucking awesome! It was unfortunate that we didn't really get to see a lot of the previous Mario races in Odyssey. I would have loved to see the Piantas return in the Seaside Kingdom. On the bright side, almost all the kingdoms have a completely new and unique race to that kingdom, and most of the designs are pretty neat. My favorite's probably the little snail guys at the Seaside Kingdom. They're pretty cool. One of the best parts about the different creatures in Odyssey is that they actually feel like they live in their respective locations, and it adds a lot to the game's atmosphere. The Galaxy games are at the top of the mountain when it comes to video game atmospheres, but one piece of the puzzle that I think they're missing is that most of the galaxies don't feel lived in. Of course they have the really well designed NPCs that I was just raving about, but I don't actually buy into them actually living in these locations, because most of the levels, while incredibly well designed, are just collections of super linear platforms. Now, I'm not at all suggesting that linear games can't feel lived in. One of my favorite series of all time, The Last of Us, is a perfect example of linear games that feel lived in, with a heavy emphasis on the past tense lived, because everyone's dead. The thing with Galaxy is how linear it is. You're gonna have a tough time convincing me that this guy actually lives on this collection of floating platforms floating through the void of space that solely exists to be a fun video game thing. He probably died of starvation or something as you progress through the game. Where do these guys eat? Where do they sleep? Where do they breed? This is where Odyssey shines. I totally believe that each of the kingdom's respective inhabitants live in each of their kingdoms. Look at the Sand Kingdom. It has buildings front and center. These little guys could totally live there. And then there's a literal city full of people and buildings and cars. They don't look like they only exist for the player to do video game stuff in. It truly looks like it's their kingdom and I just so happen to exist in it. I can't emphasize enough how much more fun it makes running around these kingdoms when they feel like actual places. It adds so much to the atmosphere and makes it feel like you're jumping around in a living, breathing world. Within these kingdoms, there's all sorts of stuff you can find and collect. Of course, you have the standard Mario coins littered everywhere, but their functionality is different now. In most of the previous games, you collected coins in order to get more lives or to heal yourself. In Odyssey, you heal yourself through other means, but most importantly, lives are completely gone. You simply lose coins instead. I think this, more than any other change in the game, shows that this Mario is different. Nintendo wasn't afraid to break traditions and ask themselves questions like, do lives really add anything to the game? What would be the punishment for losing all your lives? Just the inconvenience of being sucked out of the kingdom just to go back in and play like usual? When I was first told that this game did away with lives, I thought it was insane. But now, I say this is the way of the future for most 3D Mario games. I didn't realize how dated the concept was until I played a Mario game without them. Lives make sense for games like Super Mario Wonder, but for sandbox games like Odyssey, stripping them from the game was the right call. If you're going to lose coins as punishment when you die, that must mean you can do something with them. Why yes you can. You can actually spend your coins at shops in a mainline Mario platformer, and this is so cool. In past games, I would usually grab every coin in sight, get way too many lives, and then continue to collect every coin I see just because grabbing that coin and hearing that little bling sound scratches the G-spot in my brain. I was grabbing coins just for the sake of grabbing coins. Now that you can use your coins, I'm actually rewarded for the urge to constantly grab every coin, which is a total game changer. Traditional gold coins aren't the only thing you collect in this game. Odyssey also introduces these purple coins. These are coins that are exclusive to each kingdom, and they have their own unique design for each one. The purple coins are a form of currency that can only be spent in their respective kingdom, and unlike the gold coins, there's only 100 of each one, so it makes it a ton of fun to try and nab each one of them. The purple coins will let you buy stuff that is typically more interesting than what you get with gold coins, including outfits themed around the kingdom and stuff to decorate the Odyssey with. The last and most important thing you'll be collecting in Odyssey are power moons. These are what the completion of the game revolves around because you need to collect a certain amount of them to power your airship, the Odyssey, and advance to the next kingdom. They're the equivalent of stars and shine sprites, though there's some key differences between them. First of all, finding a power moon doesn't immediately yank you out of the kingdom. You get to stay right back in the action and keep hunting down other moons. Secondly, there are a lot of power moons, 880 to be exact, including multi-moons, but not counting the ones that you can just buy at shops. With a number that big, you find them all over the place. They function similarly to Korok seeds in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, which is a very good thing to be compared to. Finding Korok seeds is a blast. The sheer number of moons means you get rewarded for exploring every nook and cranny of Odyssey's kingdoms. They never feel like they're too easy or like their value is cheap either. Sure, there are a lot of them, but you also need quite a lot to move on to the next kingdom. The end result is getting consistently rewarded for being curious and poking around, which is something all open world games should strive for. You can also obtain multi-moons from defeating bosses, which are worth 3 moons. That seems like a good place to transition from the kingdoms to the bosses. Bosses are a really important aspect of a game to me. I love big, memorable boss battles with cool gimmicks and bosses with cool designs. This is one area where I think Odyssey lacks just a little compared to other 3D Mario games. It's a pretty mixed bag overall. I'd say about half of them aren't super memorable. I think this series has set the bar really high for boss battles, and both of the Galaxy games are mostly responsible for this. These two games are up there in terms of having some of the most memorable boss battles I have ever experienced. I vividly remember stuff like Gobblegut, King Caliente, Mega Leg, Bowser Jr.'s Mega Hammer with its big honk and robo boobies. You also had this thing. I don't know why I remember it so well. It kinda jiggles around when it moves. I would never edge to this! Anyway, you get the point. I feel like I could keep listing Galaxy bosses. After playing Mario Odyssey for the first time in a few years, whenever I would land in a kingdom for the first time, one of the first questions that would come to mind is, wait, what the hell is the boss in this kingdom? There's definitely some good ones in here. One of the first ones that always comes to mind is the centipede thing you fight in the Metro Kingdom, which looks like it's straight out of a Metroid game. In another kingdom, you fight a realistic looking dragon, which was insane the first time I saw it. And how could I forget the classic Nintendo floating head and hands boss at the end of the Sand Kingdom, similar to the final boss in Super Mario Wonder, Bongo Bongo from Ocarina of Time, Bouldergeist in Mario Galaxy, Godan from Wind Waker, this fella from Donkey Kong Country Returns. I love these types of bosses, they'll never get old to me. One great decision Nintendo made in terms of bosses is replacing the Koopalings. That's right, Nintendo finally took the Koopalings behind the barn and put each of them down. This is fantastic! We finally got these new guys to replace the Koopalings called the Brutals. Their fights aren't the most exciting thing ever, but it's great having new henchmen to fight as mini-bosses. Overall, Odyssey definitely has some gems in terms of bosses, but I don't think they all lived up to previous Mario bosses. They're all definitely fun, just not as memorable as in the past. They're definitely better than 3D World, that's for sure. The only boss I can remember from that game off the top of my head is the big worm guy. One of the most important aspects of any platformer is how it controls. In most cases, the player should feel like they are in complete control of their character, so that precise platforming isn't frustrating. This may seem like an obvious thing that should apply to all video games, but I think that games with more story-focused approaches such as Death Stranding and Red Dead Redemption can get away with clunkier controls in order to prioritize realism with their moving animations. I don't want realism in my Marios though, I want tight, responsive, silky smooth controls that give me complete control of Mario. I remember seeing the first trailer for Super Mario Odyssey at the 2017 January presentation, and being kind of weirded out by the way Mario moves around. It was hard to put my finger on it, it just looked different from Mario games in the past. I was honestly pretty worried about how this game may feel. When I first played the game, however, this worry evaporated immediately, as this is the best Mario has ever controlled. It may sound hyperbolic, but this might be the best controlling video game I've ever played. Mario's movements in Super Mario Odyssey are unbelievably slick. They're almost as slick as using one of those toy sticky hands to grab stuff instead of using your regular hands. Don't worry, I got it. Let me just... He feels super responsive and is able to turn on a dime. Whenever I mess up, it never feels frustrating or unfair. It always feels like it's my fault. As far as the moveset, Mario has not had this many ways to move around since Sunshine. You have all the classic Mario moves such as triple jump, long jump, spin jump, sideways somersault, backwards somersault, ground pound, and the returning dive. The roll also returns, though this time you can do it continuously. I wouldn't say it's particularly useful, but it's a ton of fun to play around with in places like the Sand Kingdom with all the hills. It's finally time to talk about the most important addition to Mario's moveset, Cappy. Mario's iconic red head is now sentient, and there's all sorts of stuff you can do with him. First off, you can use Cappy offensively by throwing him directly into smaller enemies, throwing him in a circle to dispose of crowds, or using a homing attack. It's a lot of fun to just throw him around to interact with the world in different ways. In fact, the kingdoms are littered with stuff you can interact with just by throwing Cappy. It's a simple but effective way to constantly stimulate the player. Cappy also adds to Mario's traversal moveset. You can throw Cappy and then jump on top of him to gain some extra distance, as well as throw him while midair, which gets you some extra airtime. Utilizing Cappy is what makes Mario the most mobile since Sunshine. The amount of airtime you can get and the distance you can travel is insane. There's one particular combo where you can do a long jump, throw Cappy, do a dive to bounce off of him, throw him again to get that extra airtime, and then dive again. This combo can be kinda tricky to pull off when you first play the game, but once you get the hang of it, it's so rewarding and satisfying. I have no idea why it took so long to get to one of the main hooks of the game, but the most notable thing you can do with Cappy is throw him into various enemies and inanimate objects to take control of them and utilize their abilities. This game, unlike many of the previous 3D Mario games, doesn't have traditional power-ups. Instead, the enemies and other creatures you possess function as your power-ups. There's so much variety to the stuff you can take control of. It could be stuff like Goombas, bullet bills, frogs, tanks, people, and manhole covers. They may not always be as advanced as traditional power-ups of the past, but there's such a huge variety here that it more than makes up for it. Every time I would land in a new kingdom, my mind is already racing with all the things I'll be able to possess. It's kinda crazy how much was added to the game just by Mario simply being able to throw his hat. The last thing I wanted to talk about is the post-game content. I think Odyssey has the best post-game content of any Mario game to date. Having Peach's Castle from 64 be its own kingdom was a genius move. It plays really well into the nostalgia factor for the N64. Nintendo tends to prioritize NES and Super NES nostalgia in their games, so the N64 doesn't always get the recognition it deserves. You can also get this awesome 64 skin that lets you run around as Mario's lower poly self, and it's great. There's a bunch more moons to collect, and it also unlocks the ability to go to different parts of the moon where you'll find all sorts of challenges. With how many kingdoms there are to explore and with all the moons and purple coins you have to collect, you'll be able to get a lot of playtime out of Super Mario Odyssey. Super Mario Odyssey is probably the best 3D Mario game yet. It definitely wasn't as impactful as a game like Super Mario 64, almost no game is. It's simply a fresh feeling Mario game that is full of wacky and clever ideas. The funny thing is, I don't even consider this my favorite 3D Mario. Since Galaxy 2 was the first one I played, it's hard not to consider that one my favorite due to the impact it had on me personally. I had never experienced 3D Mario prior to that, so it blew me away when I played it. With all that being said, I consider Odyssey the best 3D Mario in terms of objective quality. It's a game that cuts out all the fluff and unnecessary mechanics and brings tons of new ideas to the table so it feels fresh. It's the one I find myself wanting to replay the most, which is why I consider it the best. This game is an absolute classic, and I will be replaying it until the day I die. It's not one of those revolutionary games that forever changes gaming and influences generations of games to come, but a game doesn't have to do all that to be one of the greats. And that's all I have to say, so farewell.